Hey guys, welcome to my channel. Apparently YouTube is going to be very impossible today because I was trying to do this in a stream and unfortunately we're just going to have to do this as an upload. I'm going to do one take and here we go. So this is the Saturday before Sunday, blah, blah, blah. And we are dealing with a new episode coming out of Sister Wives, which will come out tomorrow night at 9 o'clock Central Time, 10 o'clock Eastern. And this season on this show, the family has been dealing with some moving. There's been some issues coming up along the way. So they moved from Vegas to Flagstaff. During this time, they had 4 properties that they still owned in Vegas that were on the market that they hadn't sold yet. And at the same time, Christine had purchased a property. They had purchased some properties for living subdivision to build homes on a street called Coyote Pass. And they also had 3 people renting with Janelle, Mary, and Robyn. On this season, though, Robyn signed a 1-year lease. And it was around that time that they found out towards the end of that lease that they were going to have to move because the owners of the house that they were renting decided that they were going to sell. This has created quite the division between Robyn and Kody. So according to my estimates, when I was able to review stuff as I was looking at the property records in Flagstaff, the Browns actually moved to Flagstaff around September of 2018. Maybe it was in August. But Christine closed on her property on September 2018. And so it was likely around this same time that Robyn was probably having to move out of her home. According to my estimations, she was likely having to move out of her house in September of 2019. We also know through property records that Robyn closed on a home shortly before that on August 30th. So here's what's happening in this coming episode. They are getting near the end of their property dispute, and Kody wants to buy and Robyn wants to rent. Robyn believes that they can find a rental because she doesn't want to have to use the equity that she received from her home and put that into a property that she would purchase, because she believes that if she put the money into the property that she purchases, the family would then have to delay building out on Coyote Pass. Kody, for his part, suggested that they buy a property because they couldn't find a home that had enough bedrooms that Robyn had needed. Robyn was also looking for a 2-year lease, which was making it difficult for the two of them to come to an agreement. In a previous episode, when the two of them were sort of coming to heads on it, it was very obvious that this specific issue was creating a lot of attention. So much so that Robyn was saying that this was the most arguing that she had ever gone through with Kody in her marriage. At one point, when they couldn't agree on things, Kody said that he would dissolve their partnership because he needed to find a home and he wanted to buy. The reason why he wanted to dissolve the partnership was because in the state of Arizona, there's this requirement that it's called a community property state, meaning a husband and a wife who are legally married cannot purchase property unless they are doing so together. So Kody if he was buying a family home for their family, she would have had to be on the title and sign a warranty deed for the home or a title for the home, and he can't do that without her. So his suggestion was, or in his frustration, suggests that he was going to leave her or dissolve their partnership. Well, tomorrow's episode, in the sneak peek that TLC just released, they have the two of them going to head. It's days before they're actually supposed to move out of their rental, and Robyn is still thinking that they are going to find a rental that they can move into within days. Kody and her are bickering back and forth. Kody is seen telling the kids, like, we have to leave this house, to which Robyn then is sobbing, saying, stop scaring my children, stop telling them that they have to leave. That in turn has her saying, we still have time to find a property, and Robyn saying, I'm still holding out for a miracle that we find a rental. Kody at that point says, if this was a partnership and if this was our partnership, we would be parting ways. Essentially, Kody was not able to get what he wanted, and he decided that if the best case scenario would be that if this was a business transaction, he would be done. He would not be having any sort of conversations with Robyn at all moving forward, which, if you think about it, is pretty intense, right? But part of me started thinking, like, what's the actual probability? Like, it's very clear that the two of these people were like having these arguments, but there's also this probability that if they were going to be out of a rental, they would have had to have something lined up, because they can't just move into nothing. Meaning they would have had to been looking at properties to buy, or they had to have been in a purchase agreement, because you can't have no plan for where your family's going to go if you're only having 5 days to do it. It also got me thinking about what the property records were showing at this time for purchases, as well as when they might have entered into a contract or a sale for this home that they end up purchasing. We know through property records that they do end up buying. The reason why the Browns moved to Arizona, they say it was because they were never going to stay in Vegas. However, Robyn's son, her oldest child, ended up getting accepted into a college that's in Flagstaff. While nobody will say it overtly, it's pretty clear that they likely moved there because Robyn's oldest son does have some specific needs, and Robyn is very close to him and would have likely wanted to be with him if he was going to go to a school in Arizona. That being said, Kody ends up getting really, really angry, and he said, we didn't even have to stay we didn't have to move to Arizona. We could have just stayed in Vegas. I would have saved a ton of money doing so. Like, he's furious. So that's kind of the first time you hear Kody talking about how he could have stayed in Vegas. And I think his frustration is that Robyn, we made this choice to move to Arizona because your son, who's his son, obviously, because he's adopted, but that's how I would imagine Kody would think, wanted to go to school down here, and you wanted to be with your son, and I allowed you to come down here with him, and I moved my whole family for you. That's sort of like what I got from it, because we know that he got accepted there. We also know that based on like all the history we know about the family, that he does have specific needs, and Robyn is very protective of him. And I just can't under any circumstances seeing her being like, yeah, you can go out of state and I'm not going to be there, you know? So I think the real reason that they moved there was for her son who got accepted there, right? Anyways, we know also that they don't end up dissolving their partnership, but he does admit that they want to part ways. But I think that this was much like a storyline, because when you look at it here, Christine Brown and Kody Brown actually ended up purchasing their property in September of 2018. When we look at the actual property records for the property purchased by Robyn and Kody, this actually had a contract date of sale of 7/1/2019, but they actually recorded the deed on it looks like August 30th. So they bought this home on July 1st, 2019. So my question is how did they suddenly have this property purchased in July but on the show, you can see that the recording date was August 30th, 2019. So they went into a sales agreement on July 1st, meaning 2 months before they moved, which I'm likely assuming they had to have been out of their rental by September 1st, because that would align when Christine purchased her home, and they likely moved around the same time that Christine could get into her house. All right, we know this. With that being said, this feels like, even though they're arguing and stuff, I'm wondering if Kody went behind her back, or if they did sign a sales agreement with this home, but Robyn was hoping that they could just walk away from the sales agreement, because obviously, unless you sign on the dotted line and you go to the closing and you actually record the deed, the sale isn't final. It's not final until the property deeds have been recorded. So that makes me wonder, was Kody doing some stuff behind the scenes? Was he hoping that Robyn would be there? Like, did he have this all lined up knowing that they had to move, and Robyn was like digging her heels in? Because this fight is ginormous between the two of them. But to me, again, Kody had a plan, because he had this property purchased in July, recorded at the end of August. They move into the home in the beginning of September, when their property lease would have been up on the older home. So this whole tension idea that they have no place to go seems outright to be a lie. Kody likely had something in a place for his kids to go. Robyn was just probably hoping they didn't have to use the option that Kody wanted to use. Either way, they did end up purchasing the property and the lot adjacent to the property, and they spent just over close to $900,000 on this home, and it has like 6 bedrooms. Coincidentally, this property is also located right next to, like, around the block from Coyote Pass. So there's been a lot of questions about whether or not they're going to build on the property in Coyote Pass. At this time, there doesn't appear to be any building going on there, and the property still remains in their names. But there are still properties in that area on the market, so you could technically buy to be on that same area with the Browns. Like, if you wanted to be their neighbors, you could buy it. So for right now, Kody says that he wanted to basically leave Robyn, and he was going to dissolve their partnership, and he was going to part ways with her. He ends up buying this property. Whether or not she was a part of that original sale, I don't know, but she would have had to be there to sign for it at the very end to be on the title. And that's the part where I think there was probably something going on behind the scenes that he was doing, and that might have been part of the reason why they were fighting so much. Ultimately, I believe that he gets her into this home by not necessarily like her free will, but if she doesn't do this, he's going to divorce her. So yes, he did want to part ways with her to get what he wanted. He ultimately got what he wanted because she didn't want to part ways with him. All right, you guys, tomorrow the new episode will air and we'll see the whole blowout, and we can talk about that tomorrow. Bye, guys.